In the previous module, we touched on color theory and mixing colors. In this module, we'll put color theory to work and look at 4 different color schemes. As we learned before, color schemes are a method of limiting a color palette. Color choices are determined by the color's locations and relationships on the color wheel. Therefore, when a specific color scheme is implemented, the colors used are not the local colors of the subject. We can alter the local color to any color that we prefer as long as we include the value range of the observed subject. In other words, as long as the value is accurate, the subject will be communicated in the painting, even though the colors are different. Using a defined color scheme in a painting can create mood and harmonize the work. This approach also creates multiple opportunities for creative use of color in your paintings. Let's take a look at 4 examples. We'll create 4 small studies, but confine them on a single canvas. In this case, I've segmented this 8x8 canvas down into 4-inch squares. We'll draw and then paint a pair in each one of the squares. The photo reference is provided below. In this example, I'm choosing to draw each pair by hand. If you wanted a more unified look to your finished painting, you could draw the pair once and then use a graphite transfer to transfer it to the other 3 squares. We'll create 4 different studies and, like I said, confine them to a single canvas. In each one of these studies, we'll think of the individual square as its own painting. Yet in the end, we want to create some harmony in the finished canvas. For this reason, we'll stick with colors that are green or red or analogous to those colors so that our finished painting does have an harmonious color scheme. Now, if we look at this example, you'll notice that the colors are not the local colors. In other words, they are colors that are different from the perceived colors that we see in the reference. We've altered the colors in order to fit with a specific color scheme. Even though the colors are different from what is perceived, we still understand this object to be a pair. This is because we have created accurate value. Remember, value is the darkness or lightness of the color. And when the color is removed from the painting, we still understand the pair. We have a full range of value, obviously. We have the darkest darks and lightest lights and midtones in between. So this gives us the freedom to change the local colors to anything that we wish, as long as the value range remains accurate. Now let's take a look at our first color scheme example. We'll start with monochromatic. Monochromatic literally means one color, so we'll be using just one color. Tints and shades of the color are used to define the form, texture, and light source. We'll use alizarin crimson as our one color. We'll create the tints by mixing titanium white with that color, and we'll create the shades by mixing alizarin crimson with a mixed black of ultramarine and burnt umber. We'll tape off the section to make sure that area is preserved, and then I'll start with a lighter value of the alizarin crimson in the background. I'll develop a darker value towards the top of the picture plane and allow it to transition to a lighter value below. We can continually go back and forth between the lighter values and the darker values to create a transition. We can also choose to allow the brushstrokes to be visible to add a bit of interest to this miniature painting. With our initial background described, we'll go ahead and put some indication of a cast shadow. Again, this is a darker value of alizarin crimson. So alizarin crimson has been mixed with burnt umber and ultramarine to produce this darker value. We'll define the shape of the shadow initially and then refine it later in the painting. To make the shadow a bit stronger, we're going to lighten up some of the areas in the foreground just a bit further, again with a tint of alizarin crimson. Remember, our goal is still to create a full range of value in the painting. Therefore, we'll be pushing the values darker and lighter, as we saw in previous modules, to create the illusion of form. We'll begin to define the overall shape of the pear with a lighter value of alizarin crimson. Now, with a darker value, we can begin to establish some of the shadows and textures that exist on the pear. Since our light source is originating from the upper right-hand corner, most of these shadows will exist on the left side of the pear. However, since the pear is rounded, some darker values will be found on the side of the light source, although they'll be very subtle. Then we can continue to develop the range of value, this time with a lighter value, and then revisit it with a darker value. This process will continue as we push the values lighter and darker in order to create that illusion of form. As we switch back and forth from lighter values and darker values, we're sure to clean the brush in between. We don't want to create less intense versions of the color, which will result by mixing a darker value with a previously mixed lighter value. Therefore, a cloth is handy and the brush is cleaned in between applications. We can go back and add a bit of texture with a darker value, and then glaze over the top of it with a lighter application. This will create some translucency in the surface and mute some of the textural marks that we've made. Slowly, as each layer is developed, the form of the pear starts to take shape. Again, it's important to be patient and allow each layer to do its job. We'll continue to push the lighter values at this point, slowly pushing the range of value between darker values and lighter values. Again, since we're only using one color here, we really can focus on that range of value. If you've never painted with a color scheme before, using a monochromatic color scheme as a study is the best place to start. It allows you to get accustomed to using a value range with just one color in a painting. Here, a much lighter value is applied to create a stronger, intense light, and then a few highlight marks are added. Now let's develop the shadows a bit further. Again, we'll use a darker value of alizarin crimson. Just as the lighter values added to the painting increase the value range, the darker values do the same, this time increasing the contrast between the dark and light values. As we add these darker values, we're careful to make brushstrokes that follow the cross contours of the form. Now with a much darker value, we can return to the cast shadow, developing the shape and the intensity of that shadow a bit further. A darker value is used initially for the shape of the stem. And then a lighter tint is used to create the highlights. In this case, the highlight is too strong, so an application of a midtone is applied over the top. Now we can remove the tape and move on to the next square. Our next color scheme is analogous. Analogous colors are 3 to 5 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. They provide a harmonious color scheme. In this case, we'll stick with 4 colors that are next to each other: yellow-green, green, blue-green, and blue. We'll start by defining the background, and we'll use a light yellow-green. The actual pigments used in this section are ultramarine, cadmium yellow light, titanium white, and then again we'll use ultramarine and burnt umber to create a natural black to create the shades. Ultramarine is allowed to dominate in the mix in areas. This will create a bit of interest in the background and create a few locations of accent. We can continue to lighten the bottom portion of the picture plane and darken the upper portion, creating a subtle transition from darker to lighter values. This time we'll start with the shadowed areas on the pear. We'll start with a blue-green. Again, this is just a mixture of the yellow and blue dominated by the blue. We'll also establish an area of cast shadow. This value is slightly darker than the value used on the pear itself. Here again, we'll define the shape of the cast shadow first and refine it later in the painting. Now with the yellow-green, we can start to define the lighter side of the pear. As this application overlaps the darker shadowed side of the pear, some of the color underneath will show through. Before developing the pear further, we'll make the value at the bottom of the picture plane a bit lighter. In essence, we're increasing the contrast between the pear and the surrounding values. This is just a lighter value of the green mixture that we included in the background. Now we can return to the pear, and here again we're going to push and pull the darker and lighter values until we arrive at the illusion of form that we're after. Here we'll start with the shadows. Again, we're cognizant of the form of the pear, attempting to pull the brushstrokes following the cross contours of the form. We can use various mixtures of the green and the yellow-green as well as the blue-green to create transition areas and various midtones. With each application, some of the applications underneath will show through. This will allow us to slowly develop the illusion. A bit of pure ultramarine is used as an accent in the area of core shadow. A few spots and blemishes are added using a darker value of the blue-green. An application of a lighter value of yellow-green is added on top. Some of the spots and blemishes will still show through this application. Using the side of the brush, we can scrub the paint into the surface using a dry brush technique. This will allow some of the color underneath to show through and create smoother transitions between colors and values. We'll also clean up the edge of the pear using a lighter value of the blue-green. And then we'll add a few spots of intense highlight. This may appear white, but it's actually a very light value of yellow-green. Now we'll add a few last blemishes here with ultramarine. Now we can push the values in the area of the cast shadow a bit further. I've mixed a bit of burnt umber and ultramarine to create a natural black, then mix that color with our blue-green mixture. This will create a nice and dark natural shadow. We'll add the stem using this same mixture. Again, we'll start with the shape of the stem and then add a lighter value of blue-green to create the highlights. And now we can remove the tape for this section and move on to our third color scheme.